Hi, folks. Hello, welcome. We're just going to wait a couple seconds to allow other attendees to to finish filtering in to the into the chat. And in the meantime, you guys can please enjoy the wonderful slide here and get psyched for our talk. I'm excited. How are you doing, Michael? You ready for this chat?
Yeah.
Good. Before we jumped on here, we were talking about fishing and being cat people. So I think we got a cool speaker today, right?
My cat's still right behind me, so
Hey, I'm hoping she stays there the whole time.
he's right there. Along with my birding scope and things like that.
Okay, great. Well, let's get started then. People can continue to filter in. But for right now, my name is Jenna Quinn, and it's my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement to welcome you all to this edition of the 49er Industries Chat. Just as we're getting started, a couple of housekeeping items. We just want to inform everyone here that the session is being recorded. So what that means for you is that this will be available for you guys on demand at our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni. Feel free to review it or send it to a friend or anyone you think might be interested in this. So since this is a webinar format, we encourage all of you that are here live with us to submit Q&A, your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll go ahead and get that on over to our guest speaker today. And if you're watching this recording, so sorry. Hopefully we get to the things that you're most curious about. And so now with that, I'm just happy to welcome our guest speaker today, Michael Capoccia. Oh, I'm so sorry to butcher that. Michael, can you school me on how it's done?
Okay. My father would pronounce it Capoccia. I kind of simplify it Capoccia. It's a little easier. It's anglicized. It's from central Italy.
Well, thank you so much and welcome, Michael. A little bit about Michael. He has had a 41-year career in aerospace as an engineering department and program manager and technical specialist in materials development and application. Throughout his career, Michael developed several new materials and processes key to current and near-term military systems. After earning his BS in engineering at CSULB, he went on to receive his MBA in corporate management at Pepperdine University. Michael grew up in Monte, California, and is a proud first-generation college grad. Michael, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
So just diving right in. So you're a first-generation degreed person, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful.
My dad was a small store owner and a Union merchant marine.
And so you are an immigrant or a first-generation immigrant?
My parents were born in Italy, so I'm first generation, the son of an immigrant. My mother was born in Villa Latina, and my father in Alvito, Italy.
Okay, and so your family, you grew up in a traditional household then?
Yes, well, traditionally, yes, my parents were married and all that. And, they spoke Italian to each other, not to us. They didn't teach it to us. But not traditional because my father was a merchant marine. So therefore he was gone anywhere between 5 and 9 months at a time. It's a little tricky.
Yeah, that's quite a gap there. How was that on your family growing up?
Pardon me?
How was that on you and your family growing up?
It started in 66. So I was 7 years old. It affected my older brother much harder. For me, it was like, oh, okay, well, you know, you're pretty young, so you're pretty flexible. But for my brother John, he was 12, so it was tougher for him. It just depends on where you were in the family chain. It was really tough on my mother. She had, you know, 5, then 6 kids, and had to deal with us, discipline us, feed us, keep us from killing each other, all by herself in a very, you know, at first in a very small house in El Monte, California.
Yeah, and from your bio, you said you're proud to be from El Monte. What was it like growing up in El Monte?
Okay, back then, first of all, it was very smoggy, so it was tough on athletics. You know, you'd go run and then cough for a lot. The smog was horrible. But it was neat. We lived right one street away from the Rio Hondo River, which led for me and my best friend, Ralph Gutierrez, to this great amount of freedom and exploration. Because when you walk 1 mile north, we'd be at the El Monte Airport. We can go 1 mile south, and we'd be at the Whittier Narrows recreation area, which is like a lot of wilderness. So a lot of fun. We had a lot of freedom.
That's awesome. And you went through public school, private school?
Our family went to a small private school, Nativity Elementary, which actually was from 1st to 8th grade. I went until 7th grade, and that's when my parents moved to Huntington Beach, Orange County area.
And when you were in school, did you have any opportunities to get involved in STEM education early, or was that something that you waited to discover when you were in college?
Well, the school we were at was run by the Sisters of St. Louis, and they were particularly a teaching organization. It's a very small order, only a couple hundred nuns worldwide. So they kind of like pound it, you know, lightly. The workload was very high. And so we learned science, we learned comparative religion, not just Catholicism. And my grades were at the point I was able to join a program that Caltech was running and still runs. It's a Saturday science and mathematics program for mostly secondary school students, which they mean high school, but they've expanded that also to junior high. And we were at the very beginning of the junior high end of it. So I studied physics and chemistry in those summers.
Yeah, and so that was high school. So
that was kind of really at the high school to college level. It was quite advanced. When I got to high school chemistry, it was mostly a review of what I already knew.
Oh, wow.
So it was really kind of cool.
That's awesome. So were you then just, STEM was where you were going, or did you have any other interests outside of STEM?
Well, I liked making models at the time. And of course, some of them, cars and things like that, little plastic models, and you painted and glued them together. But I also did a number of them were spacecraft, because this is the time of the Apollo program. And El Monte's in the San Gabriel Valley. This is the center of aerospace, Southern California. My mother worked for a short time for Futurecraft, which built special valves for engines. And this is what my neighbors' parents all worked in, the local aerospace plants. So we always thought of that. And of course, we also had regular reminders of aerospace, sonic booms, because they were delivering airplanes from El Segundo assembly plants. They deliver them to the desert testing area, and they'd fly pretty much right over Highway 39 because that's the lowest point in the San Gabriels. So they'd fly over there and they'd accelerate, and we get a nice sonic boom. And this is before there was a speed limit. That came out in the 70s. So it was, you're surrounded by this. It was always there. Kids' dads were making go-karts in garages because they had access to welders and steel tube, because it was just excess from what they were building airplanes out of. And he took the scrap home and cut it up and build things out of it. There's a lot of that going on. It was a pretty magical time to grow up.
Did you yourself get a go-kart made?
My brother and I used to go down to the end of the Rio Hondo River with wagons, and we'd pick up, I hate to say it, we were trash picking. Essentially, we were trash picking, and we'd pick up old bicycles, and you'd find frames of other people's stuff because it would get washed down with the river. And, people threw things away in the river all the time back there. So you get washed down in a flood. So you go out there, pick it up. And, after a while, you'd assemble bicycles and sell them, get a few dollars. And we found a mini bike frame, like complete frame. We said, oh, now we need our tires and an engine. So got tires, and Dad's lawnmower. We took that one apart, took the engine, put it on there, and took off. Dad wasn't real happy about that when he got off the ship, but we figured we had about 4 months of having fun before we had to put it back on. So we had a great time with that. And so yeah, we were, we had a lot of freedom, and most kids did right then. It was most parents were pretty glad that you were out of the house. Get out of here, kids. It was definitely more of a Dennis the Menace thing.
Come back when it's dark.
Yeah, come back for dinner, maybe.
Well, that's awesome. But so when you were, done with the bike, right? When Dad came home and he had to put his lawnmower back together.
No.
Where did your
I remember that. It was pretty loud. Bad. Just looked at it. He looked at it. He says, look at the garage. He looked at us, looked at the garage. He looked at the mini bike. He said, I know you want to know about this. Just fix it.
Well, when that happened, right? What outlets did you have to be able to continue to create? Did you have things in school that allowed you to learn that kind of, or just give you that space to create?
Not in elementary school, but I got a great hit in high school back then. We moved, like I said, that was up until 7th grade. 8th grade was kind of like just this culture shock moving here, and it took me all year to figure out which way was up. But it was nice because now instead of 35 miles from the beach, we're 5 miles, which was a pretty quick bike ride, honestly. And I spent a lot of time down there. But come back into high school and I realized I could take all my college prep courses and still had time to take shop classes. So I started taking shop classes and enjoying that. And then I got a job when I was 15 working at a local gas station, which again, okay, you closed up at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, depending on what day. And then I had a shop that I could work in until whatever I wanted to go home. Again, my dad was gone for 10 or 11 months at a time. And my mom was pretty happy me not being there. Because she knew where I was, because you could actually see the gas station from our backyard.
Oh, wow, that close.
That's where the house was located. And so she could see if the lights were on, she put the binocular on. Yep, lights are on, I'm still there. So it was okay. And yeah, there were still farms in the area at the time. Gives you an idea how much it's changed. but that allowed me a lot of fun, and I got into riding motorcycles, and I learned all this stuff in shop class, and that's really where I got interested in materials.
Yeah, why would that cause you to get interested in materials?
Well, I was taking auto shop classes, and one of them is hot metals, which was the foundry and forging arts. So you're doing foundry, forging, and welding. And we had a break, and they're showing forging from a perfect circle piston ring movie. I can imagine it right in my head. I could play it in my mind today of this forging for a Bucyrus Erie gear drive. Bucyrus Erie is out of business. They made steam shovels. That's a dead industry. And this fascinated me, and that's what I wanted to do for a living. So whatever that was. And so I started figuring out by going to the library on campus and studying what is this, and realizing, oh, this is metallurgy. This is, I was a person who read the encyclopedia when I was a kid, a geek. And so I kind of had an idea what I was looking for, but I found out that, well, materials engineering was taught at Caltech, cool, very expensive, Long Beach State, very affordable, and UCLA at the time. And Cal Poly, but why go to Cal Poly when I go to Long Beach? I mean, I wasn't going to drive up there. I mean, Long Beach was much closer. So I kind of set my sights along those lines. And when I graduated, I had a discussion with my dad about it, and he encouraged me to continue my education, even though I was thinking about being a mechanic. He said, just continue your education, go learn this engineering thing, because you'll just be better mechanic, but you might just love engineering, and it pays better. It's like, okay, fine. Took me a while to start into Long Beach. I had this is the problem about being the son of an immigrant, first generation. I had no idea what it took to get into Cal State LA, or Cal State Long Beach at the time. No idea. Okay, I wasn't exposed to this, so I missed the deadlines for getting into college in my senior year. I had all the tests. I did real well in the SATs. I did the last SAT you could take, I took, but I missed out. So I kind of blew it and went to the JCs for a while, which is fine. It's a great place to start. And I hadn't really made up my mind yet. But by my second semester, I had an instructor who cared, saw that I was kind of lost in this process, and helped me through. And he was my math instructor at Orange Coast College. And he kind of took the bull by the horns, found all the paperwork, and had it sitting for me to fill out, and called me into his office. He said, look, you really need to do this, and encouraged me and got me to go to Long Beach State. And I was taking my finals at OCC in my first week of school at Long Beach at the same time. And it was the nicest thing anybody ever could have done for me, honestly. That was a great favor. But again, this is a problem that first generation kids are going through. This, for me, it was not a big stumble, but today that's a much larger stumble, much harder to get over that. And I hope the schools reach out more for this kind of stuff, because honestly, my high school couldn't care less. They were terrible at the time. So
yeah, I mean, it sounds like that professor was, a really great mentor for you. Is that someone that you kept in touch with, or?
Not really, because he was a retired engineer, and he was teaching just for a few classes, and he moved afterwards. which is kind of weird. My brother actually had him for the same classes when he was going to the JCs for a while. So that was a nice guy, really great. I tried about 6 years, 7 years later to go back and find him, and he'd already moved. But that happens.
Well, so you made it to CSULB, and we're so glad that you did. What was your student experience like when you were a student?
Difficult. It was.
Why?
Oh
What
my
was so difficult?
God, engineering is hard. All of a sudden, I went from basically, honestly, I got great grades in high school, and I didn't really work very hard to. Holy moly, it's hard. It's competitive. The math is taught by professors of mathematics. Whoa, and they were teaching it to mathematicians, and you're an engineer. You actually kind of like wondering, well, what do I do with this stuff? Well, they didn't care because to them it was just the math. The pure math was what they thought was interesting, and then you're working on this thing. Well, what do I do with this stuff? And it takes a while to figure out later. Actually took until you got to differential equations, and you sit there and say, oh, well, this is where you actually start solving real engineering problems, is with differential equations and things like that. Oh, this is where it started making sense. Although you needed the math to pass physics, which is like one of those things. Because if you didn't have the calculus, the physics would just went over your head. You never would have made it. And the physics was actually a fascinating topic. So that was what was neat, because you're learning how the world works, how everything works. So that was fun, but it was hard. It was difficult.
Was there anyone who or anything that made it a little bit easier for you to get through the program?
It's really funny. There were two things. One was I had a great professor at the time, Dr. Raymond, metallurgy professor, interesting fellow. And he was a great help. Dr. Gilpin, who was the head of graduate programs, was a big help. And I got involved with strangely enough, with the awards committee, which kind of got me to look at other parts of student life, which was nice. It was a nice distraction, so that I didn't feel all the time that you're just working and working and working. And that was a lot of fun. But those professors really were able to get me to understand not just here's the class, here's what you're learning, but how these all fit together into developing a basis of knowledge that you need to solve the programs when you go out to work. I mean, I never would have thought my quantum mechanics class would ever have been useful for anything in this world. And since I got into stealth materials, low observable materials, and you're actually designing loss into a material, and it's like, oh, yeah, all of a sudden the spin matching in materials was important, building up different magnetic materials and making sure that you had an open spin worked. There's all kinds of stuff like that was pretty fascinating. What alloys were going to work, what alloys were not going to work. So I mean, who would have thought that class would have been so important, or that electromagnetics, which everybody struggles with electromagnetics in physics. That's a difficult course. That wound up being some of the most important work I did. Every day I was working in that world of electromagnetic materials. So these instructors were the ones who really got me to see the big picture.
That's wonderful. And I mean, were you able to stay in touch with them as you were going on through your career?
In fact, the last time I talked to Dr. Gilpin, he was a professor emeritus, and it was about 12 years ago, 15 years ago. And I was complaining because one of my young engineers was actually using the same end of class analysis for engine balancing for kinematics and dynamics. I go, oh, this is the exact same, I mean, it has the same misspellings in it. You know, I remember this analysis assignment. So he said, well, could you help me with it? I said, well, yeah, I wrote the program. Can I see it? I said, sure, I'll bring it in tomorrow. Totally useless to him. So I brought my program into him, and this is the funny part. Okay, we were using an IBM System 360 at Long Beach State at the time. It's a shared system. And it used IBM cards, which are a piece of cardboard where you punched holes in it, and it would read at the programming was in BASIC, not even HP basic programming, spaghetti code, 450 lines of spaghetti code. It was a box, two shoe boxes full of IBM cards. And he said, what the heck is that? I said, well, that's my program. If you find a card reader, you can use it. What? And I said, it's in BASIC. And he said, I can't use it. And I said, no, it was my joke to you. And sat down, I helped him work out how to set the problem up. I'll teach you how to set the problem up. You have to do the math and you have to do the program. But I'll teach you I'll help you set the problem up. So it's easy. And it was like, make sure you work in polar coordinates and some other stuff like that. But yeah, that was pretty hilarious. I went in to talk to Dr. Gilpin, and he had told me that they do this. We're doing this on a regular basis every few years. And what it was is they were able to compare the students across time by using these exact same exams, peppered throughout the program. They were peppered all throughout. And they showed the statistics on, it became basically a quality graph over the years, and little humps in it on how the school was teaching the curriculum. So it was pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating. So I found it neat that the school was measuring itself to that level of detail over 30 years and more.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Track and to make sure it was doing a good job for the students. That was pretty fascinating. That was impressive.
And a lesson you learned many years after the fact, right?
Oh yeah. No.
So so you graduated with your degree from Long Beach. Did you know right away you wanted to go to grad school, or what was your transition to grad school like?
Well, at the time, the formula for success was engineer with an MBA. They'll go out and run companies. Okay, well, I had a kid. I was married. I had a young child. I had to take a job, pardon me, 35, 40 miles away in Cucamonga. Settled down, family life, bought a house, bought a house right after I graduated. It was a small house. It was expensive for the time, but I'm not going to say what it was because it'll just irritate everybody.
Oh yeah.
And
Everyone will rage.
housing is ridiculous. I know it. I mean, my house is $1.2 million. I said, that's really small dollars, isn't it? No, it's just stupid numbers. Anyhow, but so just kind of worked. I wasn't working where doing what I wanted to do per se, but I was broadening my horizons. I had some discussion with guys I worked with at Rockwell, and they said, well, you need to broaden your horizon. You need to do other things and then figure out, learn more, move around a little bit. So I did that. I went to General Dynamics. I became a manufacturing engineer. I went to Northrop as a manufacturing engineer in composites for the B2. And then I moved into material manufacturing research and development, which was really nice. A different viewpoint. Again, now you're trying to do the job better, bring in new techniques. And again, it was mostly composite materials, which were new at the time. Structural carbon fiber and things like that. So around 1990, so this is 8 years after I was in school, after I was working, I started to see that maybe it was time to go back to school. And I decided, well, let's get a master's in materials engineering. I went to Long Beach, and I looked at the class list, and they said, well, hey, I've taken all this already. I've taken all these classes here. And then sat down with the professor at the time. I think, I forgot who was running the school. I apologize. And their comment was, yeah, you really can't get your master's here because you've taken everything. It's just not fair. 2 math classes are all you're missing. So I said, okay, whatever. So I left and went to look at Cal Poly, and they rejected me. Sounds terrible, because I had taken more than they offered in their master's program. Okay, these are nice things to say about Cal State Long Beach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that my bachelor in '82 was already better than the master's that was being taught at a competing university. That's pretty nice. Wow, okay. Then I went to Caltech and was looking there, and they were more structured. I had to be a full-time student. I'd have to leave my job. Like, I've got a mortgage and 3 kids at the time. So I decided to go work on my MBA and kind of broaden my background. Look at maybe going into management. I went to Pepperdine, and I am telling you, I don't mean to put down a school, and I'm not. Pepperdine is one of the toughest business schools on the West Coast. And it was a snap compared to engineering school at Cal State Long Beach. It really is. If anybody's telling you go get an MBA after your engineering degree, hey, go get it. They're going to pay for it. They'll give you my money. Just do it. There's absolutely no analytical thought processes whatsoever. It's read and regurgitate. It's really easy.
Good tip.
Yeah, it's really easy in comparison.
Michael, we have a question from the audience, if I could. Someone has asked, what was one of the big lessons as you were making your way up the ranks from individual contributor to program management?
What was the big, pardon me?
What was one of the biggest lessons from when you were making your way up the ranks?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, there's a couple. Number one, and this is important for anybody moving up any rank anywhere, the people you step on the way up are going to help you on your way down. Okay, and that means don't step on people. You're there, and I will tell you right now, if anybody tells you differently, engineering is a collaborative activity. You personally have a responsibility to do, when you're a very young engineer, to do maybe engineering orders, small designs. Okay, you're given a small controlled task, and they're trying to see, are you going to think right? Are you going to move forward on it? But as time goes by, you're going to get larger and larger efforts, and you need to work with other people. And they need to work with you, and they don't necessarily want to. They're busy doing whatever they need to do. And so you really have to work very, very hard on your, some people call it emotional intelligence versus your problem solving intelligence, but your people skills. Polite, ask nicely, work with people, go in with the attitude that you need help and you're asking. Be humble, because if you're asking a senior person, they're busy. They have more pressure on them to perform their what do you want to say? Their deliverables are more critical to the program than yours are. That's the way it works. And as time goes by, your deliverables become more critical. So it's you have to learn to work with people and play nice. And don't get too involved with developing opinions of people. You might run into somebody who is a real miserable human being the day you talk to them. You have no idea what they just heard on the phone that they just hung up on. You have no idea what's going on in their life at all. You just work with that person, do your technical task, and you go off and do your other job, and just look solely at what that person and you did together on the technical work. Don't worry about any of the personality issues and conflicts, because that can be completely different one day, 2 days later, and you may not be the person who's there that sees it differently. So don't let first impressions cloud your opinion of individuals. In fact, don't develop opinions of people. Just work with them as always as equals, or as people, as mentors, and you'll be in great shape. That's the most important thing I can think of.
Great lessons. We have another one. I've heard engineers work project to project and not long term at one company. Is that still true? And if so, is that still the case, or have things changed?
Okay, it's up to you. Okay.
Explain.
All industries are cyclical. All employment is cyclical. Period. Aerospace is probably used to be one of the worst. It's not as bad as it used to be. It's much less cyclical, but these are all project-oriented efforts. Whether you go work at Parsons, Fluor Corporation, Fluor Daniels, they have a project. They're going to go build, say, a power plant, a refinery, a solar, and they need a lot of people to bring them through. So they will hire maybe 1,000 young engineers, what I will call E1s, straight out of college, E2s, 2 to 3 years of experience. And they know that you're only going to work there 3 to 5 years. That's how long the project's going to be. Now, in that 3 to 5 years, some of those people are going to leave because they have jobs that have come by for them, because some people are always looking for work that are more interesting. They might move into different parts of the company. they might decide that they can't stand living where they're living and they go move back to where they came out from. So there's a certain amount of that peaking starts taking care of itself by people removing themselves from the project and the organization, which leads to overtime, which is always nice for those who are behind. Okay. So that's part of it. The other part of it is some people work better than other people. Some people are more valuable as time goes by. Some people may have had really bad luck in their life at that time and made it difficult, where the company has to look at them and say, well, if I'm going to keep 4 people out of 10, yeah, I had to put up with a lot here, but and your output wasn't that great. So they narrow it down, but they don't get rid of everybody, because there's always senior people are retiring, other people are disappearing. So they're always looking to keep their better performers. And that's not always the fastest. It's not always the most accurate. But sometimes it's the most broad base. It just depends. So in any given individual, you just work to what your job's as best as you can. And when you run low on work, you make sure your manager knows, and maybe you'll be taking on greater and greater tasks. And as you become more and more valuable, you're the one person, you're the people they want to keep. And then when the next program is coming down, you have all this experience now of doing not just the smaller tasks, but you've taken on the larger tasks. You've taken on, your job has grown in 5 years. So now you're kind of working the leading edge of the next program. And you're designing it before it actually gets paid for during the bidding process. So then this is a natural progression. And as you do this 1 or 2 cycles, now you become a project engineer where you're in charge of maybe 10 to 15 people, because you've learned all these hard and soft skills that you don't learn in engineering school. These are things that are, the school of hard knocks, basically. And this is all industries. It doesn't matter. And it's not just engineering profession. There's a lot of professions. Nurses, they get hired on to a new hospital. You build a new hospital up and you filter through them. Some aren't as good as others. You get rid of them. The hospital gets larger. Oh, it splits up. It takes on different connotations, and different jobs become more important than other jobs are. And so there's a change in the work balance. This is change is always been the forefront of developing a mature economy. Okay, as it changes, continual changing in industry. Industries that don't change much, concrete production. It was in Portland cement was invented a long time ago. They don't change it much. And your job as an engineer in a Portland cement company will be keeping all the equipment operating. And that doesn't change much. Electric motors, screws. Okay, that's a nice, safe job. It's kind of boring. But everything else, automotive, cyclical. Motorcycle, cyclical. Aircraft, any part of aircraft is cyclical. Look at Boeing. They had to stop production of the 737 for 2 years. Well, that put a lot of people out on the street, engineers and production workers, yet hired other engineers that had to solve the problem.
Right.
And then they go back, you go, okay, you got your, you're able to go back to work, pick up as many people as you can, hire new people. And it's 3 to 5 years of hard work, getting everything back up to speed. And what happens next? Oh, maybe there's a new airplane coming down the line. They shut the 747 line down. they're talking about a 737 replacement now. Well, okay, that's 10 years of engineering work and studies. So, yeah.
It's very dependent then.
I mean, who wants to do the same thing for 40 years? You don't. It's boring.
True, very true.
I mean, aerospace to me, I worked in it for 40 years. If you read my CV, it confused you on all the different things, but it wasn't that unusual of a experience base. You know, it's just the way things change. Things change a lot in 40 years. I mean, just think today, 10% of the cars that are sold today are electric. 15% are hybrids. 20 years ago, 40 years ago, it was hard to find cars that had fuel injection. They had carburetors, they had terrible automatic transmissions, they got rotten gas mileage. You know, I mean, 14 miles per gallon, hey, that was great for a full-size car. You wouldn't put up with that today.
Right.
You know, so yeah, things change.
Well, as we are wrapping up the chat, I cannot believe this just feels like it's flown right by, but with, all your experience, is there any one piece of advice that you would give to current students or recent alumni who are looking to, follow in your footsteps and go into aerospace? Is there one piece of advice that you'd give them?
Yeah, well, never follow the footsteps of the beekeeper. No, network. Join your professional societies. Join them. You don't have to be active. Go to the meetings. Yeah, it's a bunch of old guys with gray hair, and a few women are in there that are senior now, but there's starting to get to be a lot more women. Used to be engineering was, when I went to school, 2 women and 4,000 students. Now it's like 35-40% at Long Beach. That's kind of really great. Well, this is just starting to see this in the professional societies. They're more conservative. But get in there, get to the professional societies. They're very important. A great way to learn what's happening in the industry, to stay ahead of trends, to get neutral away from your company mentoring. And then in your firm, all firms now have several networking organizations within them for management, for engineering. Some of them are very specialized. They might be ethnically centric. They might be first graduate centric, little things like that. But there's all kinds of opportunities, because you want to know. The networking helps you with your professional life by seeing the company in a broader light, so that you get a better feeling when there's always weird things that come down the pipe. What are they trying to tell me here? And you get a better viewpoint from people who are in business, engineering, facilities. Oh, this is what's happening. Because it's hard to communicate clearly. You might be able to find out about new projects that are happening, new programs, new opportunities, before they wind up being posted. So you can start getting, oh, that's happening. How do I find out more about that? And there'll be communiques that you can start understanding more about. But the networking is really the biggest thing. And no engineer, a chief engineer, let's take clarification. I'll step away from this for a second. I'm going to go down a little path. A chief engineer in aerospace is an interesting job. I've been a chief engineer. A chief engineer is not the head who's makes all the yes and no decisions on a program. Far from it. His job is to keep all the technical heads from killing each other, honestly. Because each technical head wants what he wants on, say, this airplane, this project. You've got, aerodynamics, you've got weapons, you've got sensors, you've got manufacturing, each one of them, all are engineering functions, and they all want to do it their own way. Well, you can't. So his job is to make sure they all have the tools and resources to do their job. What does that sound like? It sounds like an HR function. Kind of is. His job is also, or her job is also, to make sure that they're all marching to the same goal. Okay, this is what the airplane's going to be here, and at some point in time, you all have to meet that goal. What he doesn't do is tell how each one of them to do their job. He just has to make sure that each one is doing their job, and that they're talking to each other, that they're communicating, and that when they get into really, it starts to look almost like a knife guy is going to break out. I mean, the colors of foreheads really, it gets pretty extreme. And to get in there and to break it down and to understand where their problems, where the differences are, and how to get them to break through that. Now, I said all that because to get it understood that that dynamic happens at very low levels. And the way you solve that dynamic and get through it is through networking. So what this chief engineer is doing is he's getting all these guys and he's forcing them to network together. These are guys who don't want to. They're all in charge of their own world. And he's forcing them to work together, to network together, to compromise together. So the better you're at that, you get at that at the low end. At the E1 level, where you're not quite sure what this standard means for bolt patterns. So you go to the materials and process engineer, your buddy there, and you sit with him and he helps explain it to you. And you realize, this is a good resource for me. That's networking. Now you're able to, you did your design right the first time, goes through there, your boss said, oh, good. I didn't have to redo your work. Good, here's a cookie. And they take the job and they go off. And yeah, it kind of sounds like that when you're a young engineer. It's like, oh, I got a cookie too. No. Smile.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of your tips and all of your experience. I think Alana has put up our thank you slide. As we wrap up these chats, we always like to ask folks or ask our hosts, if someone had questions or wanted to learn more, get more information from you, how might they best contact you? Is it LinkedIn or an email?
I could be contacted through LinkedIn by name. I'm the only one. Trust me, I'm the only one with my last name in LinkedIn. You might find my younger brother, Brian, and it's obvious we're not the same person. And if you got him, he would send you to me. Don't worry about it. I mean, if you got my last name, it'll get to me. There are less than 200 people in the whole country with this last name. That's one. Number two, I'm on Beach Nexus for the mentoring. And even if just want a real quick chat and a question or two, hey, that's mentoring. I'm happy with that. That's fine. So my email gets clued in through that, and that works. So
awesome. Well, thank you so
have the ability to get to me.
Perfect. So thank you so much for sharing all this with us. For those of you still watching, if you have any questions, please feel free to find Michael on Beach Nexus. Thank you so much for attending. And Michael, if you'll hang back, we'll just say goodbye to everyone and have a great day.
All right. Thank you.